In the previous section, I made a case for swing development consisting of the cooperative efforts, activities of three components: the mechanical component, the physical component, and the mental component. In this section, where I will go into the specifics of the PCRW process, and more importantly, the further development of the standard swing, we're going to look at two components. Main emphasis is going to be on the mechanical aspect of the swing. In reality, that's what PCRW is about. PCRW is an attempt on my part to explain, specify what constitutes a high-level swing. Later on in the ebook, there will be some discussion regarding the physical aspects of a high-level swing. But the real emphasis of this ebook is on the mechanics aspect of the swing process. One last point I'd like to make regarding the three elements, that the three elements, when they're brought together, result in a fourth element, or an overall performance function of the swing process, and that's called skill. Skill is, what's interesting about skill is that, and if you look at it from the standpoint of being made up of three components, mechanics, physics, and mental, what I've tried to explain in the past to people is that you can take three players, all who have the same skill level as defined by their capability to hit a ball. One may have great mechanics and okay physicals and mental. Another may have great physicals and okay mechanics and mental. And a third may be great mentally and have okay physics and mechanicals. And this is what makes it so difficult when you're talking about hitting. This is why, to me, it's so important that you break it down into three components. You break it down into the mechanical aspect, you break it down to the physical aspect, and you break it down into the mental aspect. Because so much of the discussion that takes place is a mixture, and it's very difficult at times to know whether they're talking about the mechanical aspect or the physical aspect or the mental aspect. For this discussion, we are really focusing on the mechanical aspects of the swing process. That being said, we're going to really delve into the mechanical aspect of the swing in such a fashion as depicted by this diagram. This diagram was first developed for rotational throwing for numbies, and what I've come to understand, believe, is that unlike coaching, where you have, when I say meaning unlike coaching, if you look at a typical baseball team, you have pitching and hitting are viewed as two separate entities. You have a hitting coach, you have a pitching coach. When it comes to how the body actually creates physical movement of both swing, for pitching, throwing, and more specifically throwing, and for the movement of swinging, there's so much similarity that it's, from a teaching of the swing standpoint, teaching of throw standpoint, there's almost a 90% commonality between the two in terms of the basic attributes. And this is something I think most people find difficult, hard to understand. And this is, as I said, I blame, if you want to use that word, I blame this dichotomy, this differentiation between hitting and pitching to the words hitting and pitching. Pitching is defeating the batter, hitting is defeating the pitcher. Hitting mechanics and pitching mechanics are not necessarily, in terms of who's teaching them or what point of view you're talking about, hitting mechanics, pitching mechanics are not necessarily swing mechanics and throwing mechanics. The problem is that when people usually talk about hitting mechanics, they're talking about mostly swing development, swing mechanics development, and when they're talking about pitching mechanics, they're talking about throwing development. So again, that's very important. So this diagram illustrates the real core aspects of mechanics. What we have, and the center portion of this, the center circle, represents the PCRW concept, or the PCRW specification for a high-level swing. And so at the core of our swing is whip, rotation, connection, and posture, or posture, connection, rotation, and whip. That's the core of a high-level swing. What influences this core, or more specifically, what is common to this core with respect to making all four of these elements work, are rhythm, tempo, and intent. And you can see that intent is the outermost circle. Intent has to do with goals. What are we trying to achieve? The effort that we're putting in to achieve, so on and so forth. Then we move down to tempo. Tempo is the overall speed of execution. Rhythm problems are typified by missequencing. Something will happen either together instead of being separated, or will happen before. A good example is pushing the bat, or I consider a good example. Pushing the bat occurs because what happens is that rotation has almost completed, and then the person allows the bat to unleash or unfurl. And because they've lost the rotation, because they've lost that momentum of rotation, the hands then become the primary vehicle for moving the bat, as opposed to being able to capitalize on momentum. So rhythm, that's a very serious rhythm problem. So again, this picture, and it's an important picture to understand, because I think it really helps you as a parent, or even as a player, have a better understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about a high-level swing. This is PCRW. This is a diagrammatic, schematic representation of PCRW, and it has all the key elements that are identified here. So this is where we're starting from with respect to our discussion on PCRW, which will then lead to discussion about the standard swing. Next page, please.